Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, August the 2nd, 2021, and this is a Moscow City regular council meeting. With that, Brandy?
Good evening, everyone. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, the first order of business this evening is the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Ann to approve the consent agenda as is. I will start the roll with Maureen.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
And Ann.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary, do you have anything for us this evening, sir?
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Okay. Item number 3, mayor's appointments, and I have 3 in front of the council this evening. Gordon Wilson, Sustainable Environment Commission. This is a county non-voting position that expires 12/31 of 2023. Scott Sumner, Transportation Commission, expiration 12/31 of 2023. Maddie Murphy, Human Rights Commission, expiration 12/31 of 2021, and that is a college seat. And I would entertain,
Your Honor,
Jane.
I move we approve that fabulous slate of applicants for our commissions.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion by Jane and a second by Maureen to approve these 3 commission appointments. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Maureen.
Aye.
I know we have Gordon, we've got some of the folks here. Gordon, would you like to get up? I always give anybody that gets on a commission, I always let them, if they would like to come to the podium and speak for a moment or so. You don't have to, but so we can see who you are. But one of the big things as the mayor and for those up here on this desk with the rest of us, really appreciate what commissioners do, commissions. It's very time consuming, but we need lots of citizens in our town and county to be able to do that. So you're welcome to speak if you want. If you'd like, come on up. Gordon, right up here to the podium, sir. We'll get you on TV and everything. You'll be a part of the record. So,
Well, just an introduction, I guess.
well, whatever you'd like to speak about, sir.
I'm Gordon Wilson. I've been a New St. Andrews faculty member in natural history for the last 18 years. And I heard about this position, and one of my area for my doctorate was environmental science and public policy at George Mason University. And I love the natural world, and I'd like to see everything flourish, not just the natural world flourish, but human flourishing as well. And so, even though it's a non-voting member position, I wanted to throw in my voice in the matter. So, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Gordon. We also have Scott Sumner here. Scott, would you like to come up and speak for a moment as well? Thank you for, I know I can embarrass this guy a little bit, just full disclosure. I've known this guy since he was about, what, maybe 3 or 4 years old, I think, when he was just a kid. It was in the neighborhood there, so, but he's.
One of them running around?
Yep, one of the many, including my kids. Anyway, welcome, Scott.
Hello. Scott Sumner. I'm from Moscow. I went to U of I. I've spoke in front of you guys on a few different occasions in the last year, and Transportation Commission seemed like a natural one as a civil engineer, and I deal with a lot of things that I think they're going to be dealing with, and I think I have an opportunity to provide the insight from my side of things sometimes that I think will help. So it seemed like a natural fit that I would reach out and try and do it.
Thank you, Scott, for agreeing to serve. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, for our citizens to be on commissions is a big deal for me as the mayor, as well as all these counselors up here, because it takes an army of people to make our city go. And so it's great. We got terrific ideas from a variety of folks, and that's pretty neat. And that's the diversity that we have in this wonderful community that we have. Well, with that, without further ado, I will move on to item number 4, which is public comment and mayor's response period, where we allow folks to get up and speak for 3 minutes and tell us what their concerns may or may not be, as long as it's not on this evening's agenda and/or something in front of planning and zoning and/or the Board of Adjustments. And with that being said, we do have several public hearings this evening, which folks will get a chance to talk, as well as another action item. So the things that are on the agenda, folks will be able to speak to, but if there's anything else that somebody would like to come up and address, please do it. State your name and we'll give you 3 minutes. With that, I see everybody is anxiously awaiting the public hearing on the Moscow's 2022 annual budget. With that, we have Gary Reedner, our city supervisor, to do the presentation, folks. So Gary, you do have the podium.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, it seems like it hasn't been a year since we did this last time. I believe I had a mask on at that time, so I feel a little bit less hindered tonight. This is the presentation for the fiscal year 2022 budget, and we had a workshop on this on July 12th, so went through it and answered a lot of the council's questions. That took about, as I recall, about 6 hours to get through. And there were a couple of changes since that time, nothing too earth-shattering. And we'll hit that here in a few moments. So without further ado, excuse me, the smoke's getting to me. So with typically our budget starts with the strategic planning. So we had strategic planning in February of 2022. The strategic plan was established back in 2015 and 16. And what it does is there were identified major challenge areas that you can see in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 regarding things that the council felt were challenges, major challenges to the city in achieving its goals and missions. So we'll hit those a little more. So the strategic planning initiatives we specifically have addressed in this budget. First is funding for the street maintenance program to address deteriorating pavement conditions. Secondly, funding in information systems to address inadequate law enforcement radio infrastructure, and we'll hit these a little bit later on in the presentation. Accumulating funding for sewer system improvements, downtown streetscape in the non-departmental part of the budget. You'll see that there is a $63,000 allotment for professional services for downtown streetscape to be shared with another $63,000 put by the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency to address downtown streetscape and revitalization. Storm sewer utility, we've been talking about for several years. We have a specific slide on that we'll talk about in a little while, but the new stormwater utility, which was slated to be implemented in October of 2020 because of the pandemic, was delayed until 2021. And council's been advised about that status of that numerous times over the past year, certainly in the last couple of months. Again, continuing commitments to Pollution Basin Aquifer Committee as we're trying to identify declining city water supply a couple of years ago. And we're also, staff is working with the Sustainable Environment Commission and Climate Action Group, working on the MCA Climate Change Science Highlights Need for Significant Action. And you are set. There was a presentation given to council just within the last month, and there will be a workshop that we're hoping to have on, I believe it's September 27th, if I'm correct. So, as you know, our workshops typically are on committee afternoons after the shortened committee meetings. So, what did we look at when we were putting together the FY 2022 budget? In 2020, we were in our 10th year of an expanding bull market. We had the highest stock market valuation in history, and then all of a sudden, April of 2020 hit, and the market lost about a third of its value over a 3-week period. When that happened, all of a sudden, state government, local government, and the federal government all went into a panic mode, and we got estimates out of the state that indicated we could expect severe cutbacks in state shared revenue, so on and so forth. So immediately we put out a call for a 10% holdback of operating expenditures, and then when preparing the FY21 budget, which is what the budget we're operating under now, those estimates also carried over into that budget. One of the things that has been done in the last 20 years on 3 different occasions, staff compensation adjustments were suspended for 2021 because we just did not know where we were going to be with our revenues. So we also had a stimulus package, if you will, that came out from the CARES Act from the federal government. And because we are a city of less than 50,000 population, our funds were distributed through the state. The governor put together a public safety grant initiative, which if the local government agreed to reduce property taxes by a certain amount, then they would backfill those property tax values with the public safety grant initiative. In our case, it was approximately 1.5 million. So not only did the council take no property tax increase, could have taken the allowable 3%, they did not last year, and lowered taxes in the amount of approximately 1.5 million in response to the governor's initiative, as well as to provide some property tax relief to our citizens. That brings us to working on preparing the 22 budget. Well, as improbable as you would think, 21 is now the 11th year of an expanding bull market. I have a degree in economics, and I don't really believe people who say that 3-week period was a recession. If so, it was the shortest recession in history. So it's generally being looked at that we are in the 11th year of an expanding bull market. So the reduced revenues that we thought were going to hit us in FY21 did not occur. So what we've done is we built this budget on the council's strategic plan and taking the most efficient uses of the resources we have as contained in the mission statement on the wall to your left. So the budget overview. What is the purpose of the budget? The budget, first and foremost, is a fiscal policy manual, an operation guide, and a financial plan. I think you've heard me in the last couple of weeks. The budget is the council's major policy document statement of the year. So if it's in the budget, that means that council wants staff to focus resources on it. And we'll see a couple of things, at least one thing in this budget that council will say, yes, we desire to appropriate for that, but we don't want you to move forward with it until you bring it back for our specific approval. But we use it as a policy document. So that's what guides staff. Operationally, it lets us know where we are spending our resources, and naturally, since the budget has to be balanced, we have to balance our revenues against our expenditures. It's a communication device. You've seen the document that we have. We have what we call the budget detail. Changed a little bit over the past years because we purchased BS&A financial ERP software. So it looks a little different, but the budget detail will essentially tell you where each and every dollar that the city of Moscow brings in is spent or it is allocated. We also have the budget summary, which is this document right here, which contains the overview of the budget as well as trends, comparative analysis, the highlights of every department in the city, communication from the mayor and from staff on documentation for the budget. And right now, the budget is balanced. It's $102,415,356. That is the entirety of the budget. As you know, a couple of years ago, we started budgeting fund balance. So those were usually held. You saw those in the balance sheets. Now it's contained in the budget, so it is appropriated every year. So the money, all the money the city has is contained in the budget. Okay, property taxes are always something that folks are interested in. Idaho law allows a 3% increase in property tax revenue over the previous highest 3 years' property taxes. That has changed a little bit in the last year. There's something called House Bill 389. House Bill 389 recalculated property taxes, put some caps, for instance, an 8% absolute property tax cap, meaning that in no case, and we've never approached 8%, so it's not going to be an issue for us, but we are not a city that is experiencing 5 or 6% growth every year either. So that won't affect us that much. However, there are some different issues. For instance, the new construction valuation, and that is properties that have been improved, buildings built over the past year that were not included in the previous year's budget. Those are things that above and beyond the 3% can be taken. And so that is no longer 100% of value, that is 90% of value. We've also seen a couple of annexations. Because it's bare land, the tax generated off it is not very much, because we've had a couple of fairly large annexations in the last year. However, and as they improve, that will increase as new construction. But again, annexations are also valued at 90% under House Bill 389. Now, as you also know, and we'll get to some specific numbers here in a moment, the valuation of property in the city typically increases every year, and as it increases, the amount of funding, because we are limited by the amount of money that can be raised on the previous 3 years, a maximum of 3%. What happens is that amount of finite money is spread out on an assessment that goes against all taxable property in the city of Moscow. So as valuations go up, typically your levy drops, and in this case, that is what happened. We got our hard numbers on property tax valuation, property assessed valuation from Latah County early last week, and in the budget workshop, you saw a number of $5.14 per thousand. You saw that drop to $5.08 per thousand because we got that increased valuation. Now, one thing, and I'll look over at Garrett Cabeza. There was a couple of years ago when Garrett was on vacation, we had another reporter, and it was reported that the city of Moscow was raising property taxes 25%. That is not, in fact, the case. There are lots of taxing districts in the city of Moscow. So the city of Moscow, and this is based on 2020, so this is lower than usual because of the governor's public safety grant initiative. But as of last year, out of $1 of property taxes paid by a property owner in the city of Moscow, 20 cents of it comes to the city or came to the city for general fund, and 4 cents came to the city as a result of the voter-approved bond, which was approved by the voters on May 19th of 2019. Other than that, Moscow School District gets 38 cents of that dollar and 3% or 3 cents for the bond. Latah County, 23 cents of that dollar, so on and so forth. So just so there's no confusion, the city of Moscow could raise taxes by 3%. And what that means, it's 3% of what we have. So other taxing districts may not take 3%, or they've got their own specific limitations. But just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that $1 of taxes in Moscow do not come to the city of Moscow.
Hey Gary, quick question. Can you remind me, new construction goes on the tax roll at the time of occupancy, correct? Or am I?
Oh, I can't remember if it's, there is a formula that they use. If it is given a certificate of occupancy, prior to January 1st, then it is taxed for the following year, but that doesn't mean if you get a certificate of occupancy on July 1st that you don't pay taxes for the rest of that year. We went through that in the Alturas project because there was properties that came on mid-year that we were given a distribution, but it was not according to this calculation.
But is it around occupancy? So it's just prorated?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
As far as I know, Sarah, chime in if I'm misspeaking. Okay, so this is a graph, and this is a 10-year graph that shows exempt, which are general fund taxes, and then non-exempt, which is bonds and interest. So as you can see, over the years, 2013, we were right around $4 per thousand, came up, went down, valuation. This is the governor's Public Safety Grant Initiative, and this is proposed for 2022. This dashed line is a trend line. As you can see, it is slightly declining, mostly because of this thing right here. Otherwise, it's pretty flat. You're going to see about an average of 2 to 3% based on, I think in Mayor Lambert's time here, we've taken no property tax increase, 2% property tax increase, and 3% property tax increase, and in some cases took a little of the foregone amount to meet certain things as well. So at any rate, that's a pretty flat trend line, and as you can see here, these represent general obligation bonds. So you've got the swimming pool and fire station number 3. In 2018, those were totally paid off. That was the last payment on the swimming pool. We had no GO debt in 2019, and then the voters approved the public facilities bond in 2019. 2020 was then when we started amortizing that. If you look at the 20-year trend, it's very close to what you've got right here. So it's just an extension. Like I say, you can see changes in valuation. You see right in here where valuations, actually we lost some valuation. So that was the Great Recession. And then, of course, again, the governor's property tax initiative. So trend-wise, 5.08 puts us just barely above the trend line. Okay, property tax summary. Sarah should really be the one up here talking about it, but what this does is it compares the 2022 proposed, this is the property tax summary page, as compared to the 2021 adopted. So again, it's a little bit out of whack because our 5.08 levy against per thousand is much higher than the 395 levy, but that was artificially lowered by the governor's public safety grant initiative. There was some discussion about what is the impacts on a $200,000 home and $300,000 home, and this is all contained in the documentation. But as you can see, this would be the tax bill on a $200,000 home in FY 22 as opposed to FY 21, and that again is because of the governor's initiative. And you'll notice that here, this is a $300,000 home, and you'll notice that there is a $125,000 homeowner's exemption where there's only $100,000 homeowner's exemption on $200,000. That's because the homeowner's exemption applies to half the value of the residence if it's utilized as a home. Up to $125,000. Okay, so this is the comparison between the 2022 maximum and the 2022 proposed, and I will confess that these numbers are probably not super accurate over here because of House Bill 389. The county gave us some guidance on that. There is a hard tax cap, so if we were going to take foregone amount, which are taxes which are authorized but are not taken by the city, up to 3%. That happens whenever the city decides to take less than 3%, it goes into our foregone amount. But since there's a limitation on that, under the old law, it would have been $5.40 as opposed to the current levy or the proposed levy of $5.08. So again, carrying that down through, these would be the taxes if those were also carried through. Again, the number is larger in most cases. In this case, you can see where under the previous, it would have been less. This is the $300,000 home, and that's because they're taking full advantage of the $125,000 property tax exemption, which they did not do up here. Okay, so where does the dollars go? You saw the pie chart. These are the largest taxing entities over the last 10 years. And as you can see, Moscow School District is larger than the other two, Latah County and City of Moscow, vary a little bit. Again, for 2020, because of the governor's initiative, Moscow was $24%, including the initiative for the GO bond as well as operationally. Latah County did not take advantage of the governor's initiative, and they were right at 23%. Okay, how do we compare with everybody else? And again, Moscow, Coeur d'Alene, and Lewiston, all of these took advantage of the governor's program. So you can see in Moscow, 24 cents out of each dollar is levied by the city. In Coeur d'Alene, it's 30 cents. And in Lewiston, it's 40 cents. So we compare very favorably on levies for our neighbor cities. Yes, ma'am?
I don't know if you wanted us to wait till the end, but it's right here, so
Go
it's
for
easier
it.
to do it. So how is it determined how much the city gets, the school district gets, the county gets? Who makes that decision and how is that made?
Well, the decision is made by the governing boards of each of those entities. So there have been times when the city of Moscow has foregone taxes, did not take a tax increase. There's also when the 1% initiative and then the limitation of 3% came in, there were levies in place at that time. So it affected those levies. It didn't equalize everybody out to a certain amount. Lewiston, for instance, as you can see, takes a much larger share, and consequently, their independent school district number 1 in Lewiston gets a commensurately smaller share because of either where their levies were at the time when the law was implemented or based on the actions of their governing boards. Okay?
Thank you.
No problem. So you can see that same thing graphically. This, after the governor's initiative, it dropped everybody's levy who took advantage of it. Okay, so we'll swing right into revenues. This is the story of last year. So state shared revenues, sales tax, liquor tax were stable. There will be some increase in FY22. In addition, we also saw a recalculation of sales tax due to legislative action a couple of years ago that we are just realizing at this time. Liquor tax actually always increased, even in times of recession and COVID and everything else. However, there was a reduction in monies to the city for liquor tax because of the funding of jails, to county funding of jails. The GPSGI, Governor's Initiative, is now gone. Property taxes return to their pre-COVID levels, and there is a 3% property tax increase proposed in this budget. Okay, where does the money come from? As you can see, this is the fund balance I talked about. So fund balance is that money that is held. It is appropriated within the budget, but it's not appropriated for expenditure. It's appropriated for meeting the city's policies, such as our financial policies, that sort of thing. There'll also be funding for accumulation of capital and that sort of thing as well. So fund balance makes up 27% of that. Charges for services, 25%. So these are our utility funds. Property taxes out of the entire $102 million budget represent 7.26%. Franchise fees, road and bridge tax, so on and so forth. Operating transfers are when we receive money in the general fund. There are funds that you have funding transferred out of that fund to support another fund. For instance, as you know, Parks and Recreation, we don't charge people to use parks. We make some revenues off of programs, swimming pool, that sort of thing. But if you want to go use the park, we don't stand there with a cash register and charge you. So the general fund generally supports the Parks and Rec program. Street fund gets transfers as well, not as much as Parks and Rec, but that's where all that goes. And this is all broken down in the budgets. So if you look in the detail where it says other revenues, taxes, intergovernmental transfers, and those sorts of things. So this is interesting. This is where the street fund gets a lot of their money. So what you have here are the highway users revenue, which is gas tax. So as you can see, it has been all over the board. So you get here into the Great Recession, it kind of sputtered around a little bit and went down, mainly because it is a per gallon tax. It's not based on the price of gasoline or fuel. So if people drive less, highway user funds go down. Now, there was a House bill, I can't remember the name of it. Which one? 312, which raised the gas tax, and they shared that funding not only with ITD, but with local government. So that's what you're seeing right here. So as you can see, that trend line is steadily increasing, but most of that increase has occurred the last 5 or 6 years. Then down here, we have road and bridge tax. Road and bridge tax is what is paid in. We get an allocation from the North Lake Tahoe Highway District for funds that come into the city. So there's a tax element to that as well. Okay, our enterprise funds. We're talking about revenues. We have 4 enterprise funds. Of course, the new stormwater fund, but the water fund, it's a 5% increase. A rate study was conducted in 2020 on the water fund and the sewer fund, and those rate studies were begun in 2004. And the purpose of them was, you'll recall that one of our sister cities, Lewiston, had a situation that they had a bunch of infrastructure that came due that they did not have the revenues ready to go ahead and replace that infrastructure. So they had to raise their rates quite a bit to meet that. That was done pursuant to a rate study. You look at it and realize that, okay, I've got this infrastructure that's nearing the end of its useful life. For instance, take sewer pipes. So what you do is you put money away, so when it comes time to get that sewer pipe out of the ground, you have the money for it. So we plug all of that information. We have a capital improvement program, a master plan for each of these funds. We look at it operational. We take into account the estimated expansion of the city, the improvements that need to be done, and then we plug it in, and a 5% increase is what the water fund was indicated was necessary and adopted by the city council. You'll recall that the water fund is in less good shape than our other utility funds because of the huge amount of money. Well number 10 and the booster stations cost just about double what the original engineer's estimate was. So we're getting that fund to recover. We had originally thought that we would get a $4.3 million revolving loan fund from DEQ, when in fact that just got us halfway through the project. So there was another $4.3 million revolving loan that is being made available to the city. We have not started to draw that yet, but it's coming. Okay, sewer fund's in much better shape, and part of that is because in the early 1990s, when we were issued a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit by the EPA, we saw that coming and prepared for it and started adjusting rates in the early 1990s for the permit that was issued in the late 1990s. So a little better shape. However, you're seeing that the next stage that's coming is temperature, might have a cooling tower, might have some other things going on out there, disinfection, those sorts of things. All of these things that are intended to treat the wastewater so that it can be reused safely and does not impact Paradise Creek. So you may see this adjusted not in this during this rate study, but maybe in later rate studies. Sanitation fund has been doing well. There's no increase that is is proposed for 2021, or excuse me, FY22. The reason for that is that we had intended to move the recycling center off its current site to a different site. Those plans are currently being reassessed. So there's no sense taking money from the ratepayers and putting it in the bank for something we're not sure what it's going to be yet. So we'll wait till that program is reviewed, and then we'll take a look at increases or adjustments at that time. You did, however, approve a rate study update to be done in the sanitation fund in the upcoming year. I would note also that the water fund increase last year was 5% as well, and council approved that in FY21. The sewer fund increase of $2.25% was waived by the council last year in an effort to lessen community impacts for COVID. And sanitation fund did not take an increase either. The stormwater fund is brand new, and I have a slide on it later on, but it is $7.92 per equivalent service unit. You have heard this over and over. The public has heard this over and over. We are an MS4, meaning that the EPA is regulating us, or DEQ, regulating us for cleaning up our stormwater. We're responsible for not only the quality of the stormwater, but the rate in which it is retained or discharged into bodies of water. So the only way we can do that is to charge for it, and so we formed a stormwater utility. Previous to this, stormwater improvements were typically done, and there weren't very many of them, frankly, were done out of the street fund. So the street fund, which already does not have enough money to do its surfacing programs, was also having to support stormwater. We also had some studies and that sort of thing, which were taken out of the sewer fund. But again, sewer and stormwater are two separate things, even though they both discharge to Paradise Creek. So that was one of the reasons that the stormwater utility was implemented. And again, as I indicated in my opening remarks, the stormwater utility was supposed to be launched, scheduled to be launched in October of 2021, but because of COVID, staff came up with some things that could be done to address the permit, but also indicated that we were going to have to move forward pretty quickly in 2022, so that's what's going on here. Notable expenditures, you saw where the money comes from, here's where the money goes. So again, enterprise fund capital outlay. Now that is 35% roughly of $102 million. That would be about $35 million. We do not have $35 million of projects that are going to be done in FY22. That is accumulated capital. So some of it will be spent, some of it is accumulated for projects that are coming. General government capital outlay, that would be things like the police station. Debt service was what we pay on bonds. General government is typically the general fund. Also in general government, but separate, is public safety, police and fire. And you'll see culture and recreation, not a very big chunk. And then you've got all of your utilities. These are our enterprise funds, and as you can see, stormwater utilities starting off very modestly at 1.122. So about $1.2 million is what that budget is. Internal service funds are fleet and information systems. Those are funds that provide services to the city as an entity. So they are about 8% of the budget. Okay, expenditures by departments. This is very similar to what you just saw, but as you can see, you've got your police department here. Public safety typically is the largest portion of general fund. So you've also got fire department over here. Non-departmental, which is where your transfers come from. So as I indicated, we've got, I believe, about $2.3 million being transferred out of the general fund to support culture and recreation. That would be in that. And then you've got all these various legislative and executive, not very big slices of the pie, so on and so forth. Okay, one of the things last year, as I indicated, all compensation was frozen. So the proposal this year is to get back on track. And I do want to compliment our staff. I did not hear any complaints from anybody over the last year. It was heartening to know that people understood that, you know, when the city has to tighten its belt, it tightens its belt. And so we're trying to get back on track with our pay system. So the cost of living adjustment that's being proposed is 3%. That represents cost of living over the last 24 months. And that is based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, I'm sorry. I thought I had something else to say and I didn't. Then we have a performance increase, excuse me. Get back there. Wonder if I'm going the wrong, there we go. Okay, performance increase, we have the actively managed performance system, which is designed to take people from their hiring date, approximately 85% of market, up to 100% of market within 4 to 5 years. So that calculates to a 4% average across the board for those employees below market. And once they reach market, you are eligible for 1% above market, which is much more difficult to attain once you have market salary. Police officer, corporal, and sergeant have a salary step and grade. That is what that department preferred. We also implemented a new employee health benefits program this year and provides some different programs to our employees where before we had one program. The benefit also is it allows the city to benefit from it as well. So depending on what program, if you took the richest program, then employees would have to pay a portion of that, whereas if you took the middle of the road program, the city would pay for the employee in total. And then we have a health savings account, which is a little different thing as well. But it does limit and reduce the city's exposure to large increases. We also have a wellness program to encourage people to stay in better shape, get your wellness checked, try to take care of health problems before they occur. And then we have a fairly robust employee recognition program that was dormant last year. We didn't have any get-togethers as staff. So this year we just had a employee luncheon, and we're looking forward to our employee picnic by the end of August or September. Okay, police program proposals, and this is, we talked a little bit about when the council passes the budget, it's their biggest policy statement of the year. This is a program, the drug detection dog program was one where council indicated that they may be willing to appropriate funds for the program, but they also wanted Chief Fry to come back in with a specific program and all aspects of it, present that to council before he is authorized to expend any of those funds. So that is, we've had a discussion about that. You've had an email that came out to you indicating that that's fully understood. The Human Rights Commission was also queried as to the drug detection dog program, and Chair Ken Font sent that comment out to the council as well. But that amount of money is $31,500. And again, before any of that is expended, the council has to give specific authorization. Okay, one of the things that occurred after the budget workshop was there was a proposal to support the Latah Recovery Center. Since this was an investigation tool for drugs, one of the things that the council indicated was, is there a way to get into prevention and education? So the Latah Recovery Center was one of those programs that council thought that could be a benefit as well. Currently, in the FY21 budget in the police department, there is a contribution to Alternatives to Violence of the Police of $4,000. And that is to recognize that there are certain services that ATVP does that lessens the impact on the police department. So it's a service that's provided that helps the community and helps the police department. So LRC would be the same thing. So that was included in there as well. That was not in the original draft budget. However, it is in the one that you've had access to the last 2 weeks. And then there are a couple of information systems requests, digital storage systems for video and forensics, council authorized body cams, and of course we have a forensic detective who works with the Idaho Crimes Against Children with the Idaho Attorney General's office. So they are mirroring all kinds of hard drives and investigating. And if you don't have those systems for those forensic purposes, that they have to keep a bunch of other hard drives. They can't mess with the evidence, so all they can do is mirror them. It just takes a lot of capacity. So we're addressing that this year in the amount of $75,000. And then there was a drone proposal, which is very common in police departments. In fact, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. I think it might have been right when Mia came on. We were at a Idaho Municipal Attorneys Conference, and the whole conference was about drones. What do you do with drones? What are people using drones for? So on and so forth. So non-departmental, as I indicated, is where a lot of transfers take place and a lot of council policies are implemented. I mentioned the Downtown Streetscape Design Project, which we are partnering with Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, $63,000 apiece. That is set to kick off, and discussions of scoping has already begun on that. Public transportation support for smart transit. As you know, we have a transit company. There is no ridership fee for utilizing it. So participation from the city and from the university in the amount of $127,000 apiece. And then we have economic development support for all of these programs here. PEP, CETA, Chamber of Commerce, Palouse Knowledge Corridor. Further in non-departmental, we are in our second to last year in this budget of paying back the enterprise funds from which we borrowed funding to participate in the runway realignment program. As you'll recall, that was done through, and it's totally permissible and legal. We had a legal opinion on it. What council did was say, okay, we will pay $500,000 a year for a total of $2.5 million over 5 years. And then council took some foregone amount to be able to pay that, half of it, and then we borrowed from enterprise funds and paid them a competitive rate of interest. That last payment will be made in FY23. So this year is the second to last, next year will be the last. Okay, youth scholarships for the pool. That's something in the amount of $18,000 that has been the standard for the last several years. Affordable housing participation, I mentioned that in my opening remarks, that $50,000 has been put in non-departmental. There is not a specific program for that, so it just is close to what had been budgeted in the past. I tell you, this thing's hard to drive. Okay, streets. Streets typically, we typically transfer $120,000 to the street department. That was a commitment that council made to the voters back when the voters voted for a 3% franchise fee on gas and electric utilities, and that was the difference between the utilities back then, so that is what goes out. We raised it this time because we needed some additional funding there. And I can't remember what specifically that was for. What's that? Oh, that's right, signage program. So we increased that as well. Okay, the highway user revenues, supposedly gas tax is supposed to come back. However, we're being as conservative as we can because we don't want to get our revenue estimates up here and then our expenditure estimates are up there. we don't spend money until we get it in, so we want to be as realistic as possible. If more money comes in than is budgeted, then that will be retained in that fund. It won't be used anywhere else. Okay, recreation and culture. So this is the amount of transfer out, $2,650,436 from the general fund. It's increased a little bit from last year, a little bit meaning $110,000, but there have been a lot of changes in that department. We have moved personnel around as well to reflect, as you know, we restructured the fund. We took the deputy city supervisor for recreation, culture, and employee services and more fairly spread Jen's salary around those different funds. Our longtime Parks and Rec director, Dwight Curtis, retired earlier this year, so we restructured, and now instead of a Parks and Rec director, we have a recreation manager and a Parks and Facilities manager. You'll also recall about a month ago, we came to you because we had a bunch of work that needed to be done, mostly in seasonal and part-time help, and we could not find anybody to do it. That has been the trend for the last 4 years. So at that time, we asked council to consider authorizing creating 2 new full-time positions funded largely, and when I say largely, we're within about $5,000 of funding them with savings in the part-time and seasonal department, or part-time seasonal line items. So that made good sense. And of course, we have standardized part-time and seasonal employee compensation, whereas before we would wait 3-4 years, adjust, then immediately behind the curve, especially when we're competing with our part-time people with the state of Washington. And their state minimum wage is much higher than in Idaho. Fleet services, as you can see, these come in from all different places. General fund, most of that will be fire vehicles, but it also includes all of community development, engineering, all of those vehicles. And of course, we're trying to comply with the sustainability standard. We have hybrid vehicles in the police department. We also have, as you can see, there's a crossover hybrid that's being proposed to replace a vehicle that's been amortized or depreciated in community planning and design. And all of these funds do the same thing. As they need vehicles, they transfer funds into the fleet fund. There's a transfer in the stormwater fund for a pickup for the stormwater supervisor, since there is not a vehicle for that person to drive, and 1/2 of the purchase of a storm sewer jet truck. That is one of the things. Inspection and cleaning of our storm sewers and facilities will be the major task that's being done the first several years of the permit. So we need that to get started so we aren't in violation of our permit. We are looking at some alternative funding sources. Perhaps ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, may have some flexibility. We're currently looking into that, and we'll bring that forward. But we've got to get started on it now. Okay, Capital Projects Fund. Other than our strategic plan, I think one of the major steps forward the city has made in the last several years is developing a capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan allows us to look at not only enterprise funds capital improvement, but capital improvements for parks and recreation, the general fund, so on and so forth. Whereas before, most of those projects were funded with, if we could get a grant, we'd get a grant. We still get grants. It's not like we're going out and applying for what we can, but we also have very real needs that can't really wait until a grant comes along. So we're accumulating funding, and it's a modest amount of funding for a city our size. But last year it was $474,000. This year it's $639,22. Again, this money is accumulated for those projects which are in the capital improvement plan as approved by City Council and brought through the budget process. So every year the council reviews that. Information systems has a fairly large increase. One of the ideas during the COVID was is there an opportunity to get council agendas, city news out? So this, we're looking at an outdoor agenda display, probably on the south side of City Hall, so that people can come by, see what's on the council agenda, and it'll be a live agenda, so on and so forth, and public service announcements, that sorts of thing. The big one, though, is emergency services oh, sorry, I missed this. Council chambers broadcast updates. We have not updated these cameras and all of the stuff that the folks are using in the back for many years. It's an expensive proposition, about $130,000, but it is your connection to the community if they aren't able to come in and attend city council meetings themselves in person. But the biggest one is the radio infrastructure, and this is something we've been working on for quite a while. We have a very comprehensive engineering study that was completed about 3 or 4 months ago. We've talked about direction, met with the fire chief, the police chief, information systems, and we've got additional questions, so we will be getting an update to that study. But the reason that we're doing that is because we need to make sure that we get coverage in all of the areas where we don't have coverage now, so we want to make sure that we actually have that coverage, and there are engineers that specialize in that, and that's why we're doing that. But as you can see, it's a big number. This is not the entire amount. It is closer to $2.5 to $3 million, and we will continue to accumulate funding for that. Capital projects in the general fund. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next agenda item, but again, this is just a review of the $9.64 million GO bond that was passed May 21st of 2019, and I see that I put the wrong address on this slide too. That should be 118 East 4th, I'm sorry.
I think everybody knows where it's at.
Yeah, I think you can find it. At any rate, we talked about, brought the Haddock building forward. In the bond itself, it was for the new police station, remodel of the current police station for use as an office facility, and repair and restoration of the man building. And we were going to move departments around in those buildings. The Haddock building came up, $875,000 to purchase that. The remodel cost for the Haddock building, the remodel costs and the purchase price are actually less than the estimate to just remodel the 4th Street facility, and we'll talk about that again in the next agenda item. So, the police services facility should be completed, the new police station, this fall. So you'll see this slide a little later as well. Has more to do with the next agenda item, which is selling, council's desire to sell the current police station. Okay, we have major multi-year street fund related projects. A lot of those are with grants. A lot of them are funded locally, but we are very aggressive working with ITD, LTAC, all of those folks to try and get grant funding, the Department of Commerce, so on and so forth. The transfer in from the street fund to the roadway improvement program, which is a capital fund, in the amount of $525,000. That is to assist with those projects as well. Then we have a couple of big projects that are going on next year. One is the 6th Street Bridge project, which we've pursued a grant, and that is currently wending its way through the federal review process. And Mountain View Road Improvements, which is an LTAC-funded project. That is the roundabout at the intersection of Mountain View and 6th Street. So that will improve that entire section of the city next year. It should begin construction in the beginning of next construction season. And in parks, as council remembers, council authorized Hamilton funds for playground equipment and development of accessible pathways in parks. Next year, $195,000 to Milton Arthur Park, and then replacement of safety surface at East City Park for approximately $91,000. We've also got other projects going on. We've accumulated funding for construction of 3rd Street along the Moser Park frontage, which is owned by the city. So we've accumulated funding for that as well. Replacement of the large play structure at the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center. This is just the tail end of that. Most of that will be completed in FY '21, but because it won't be completed fully until after October 1st, we've allocated $25,000 in this year's budget for that. And then just a couple of improvements to the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center and the HERC. Stormwater Fund. I indicated we'd have a slide about this. As I indicated, we are a MS4. We've received a permit, and I think I've talked about all of this sort of thing. So the council settled on $7.92 per month for each equivalent service unit. I will note that we delayed a bunch of capital improvements in order to get that rate to that competitive rate. So it doesn't mean that it's being fully funded. I know there have been questions about the previous funding that was going into stormwater before we had a utility. Is it possible that that money can be cut from the budget, when in actuality that money was money that was not going into roadway improvement programs, which is underfunded even before you take stormwater out. So, water, we've already talked about the 5% rate increase, and this is the debt service that we talked about a few moments ago. This is the $4.3 million revolving loan fund for well number 10 and the booster stations. Sewer and sewer capital, as I indicated, even though the 2.25% was recommended to be implemented last year, council did not do that to give some COVID relief, so it is imperative that we put it in place this year. There's also a transfer in the sewer capital fund in the amount of $2,126,728 for all of the capital improvements that are identified in the capital improvement plan. Includes sewer interceptors. Some of that is we're doing some utility improvements across the right-of-way where the Thorn Creek Highway is coming.
Small town, family-friendly, all that good stuff. Lovely little town. And we don't see the underbelly of it that's out there. The police do, and they work with it. It's the same streets, it's the same love of city they have, we have, two different sets of eyes. And I think we, the public, need to bear that in mind. Which brings us to the one big issue I saw in the budget workshop, which was the request for the dog, the police dog. So that's what I'm talking about. So the dog is an effective and proven tool to deter and manage tough situations. It's a humanely treated and loved animal. It will be enjoyed in public settings. And we have a bunch of donors that are going to help offset the cost. So I don't see a good reason to say no. The dog is a tool. It's just like a body vest or a body camera, and we don't say no to those. In the budget meeting, you all went off into social issues for quite extensive conversation. Those all deserve their own focus and funds. And I say we don't steal from Peter to pay Paul. That's a bad deal. I think, if I remember right, John Luthi, who's the author of your strategic planning, the way he put it was, you don't take a slice of pie and slice it up some more. You figure out how to make a bigger pie. And that's your challenge. That's what you need to do, so we can cover everything. I'm really glad to see that you did take a step in that direction by adding the $4,000 each to the ATVP and LRC that was brought up tonight. Good job, good job. That's the right angle to take. I would say, remember, every single one of these police officers every day are willing to put their lives on the line for us, whether that is a flood or a wildfire or a traffic wreck or a shooting. And that's a hell of a thing for someone to do for you. The only thing they ask for is the tools for their job. So I think we need to give the dog a whirl.
Thank you, Victoria. Come on up, Dan. Don't be bashful.
Is that your timer?
It is actually. Try to keep it to my limit. My name's Dan Schoenberg. I'm co-owner of Plus Properties here in Moscow, and I live just outside the city limits of Moscow. Lived here since 1978. Usually I start everything with a story, so tonight I'll start with another story. A number of years ago, I was president of the Moscow Arts Commission, and we were having a conversation about farmers market. And in this case, it was a conflict conversation where our market vendors thought there were too many people bringing in non-grown produce. And it taught me a lesson. I grew up on a ranch, I grew up on a farm. We generally didn't go out and buy produce. So they kept talking about waxed cucumbers. I think, I've never heard of that brand of cucumber. And I asked what a waxed cucumber was. And someone laughed at me really good from the group and said, that's what you buy at the store and they wax it, and that's vendors are bringing in pre-bought product and not growing it. So it's a lesson on you don't know what you don't know until you learn what you don't know. And I learned a little bit about that. That brings me to the budget. And I think I sent a couple of email correspondence related to the budget with the suggestion that we look at the relief of funds from the stormwater fees. I calculate it to be about $255,000. My numbers could be off a little bit. And provide relief to citizens of Moscow in terms of fees and taxes that are collected this year. And they're significant. You know that, and I know that, and some of it's mandatory, and we all get that. We're at over $2 million. What I'm suggesting is that the council have that conversation. It was great to see the staff. I got a response tonight from the staff, and I saw in the presentation a number of items related to my questions. Appreciate that a great deal. I realize that there's many things in the city that are probably underfunded. There's probably many things that in citizens' pockets that they would like to be able to fund themselves. So that's the balance act. And what I'm suggesting is that we do a relief for a year to lessen that over $2 million increases in taxes and fees to the citizens. That's a big chunk. And do it in a way, and that doesn't mean that you can't go back. I mean, if we did it from a tax perspective, $255,000 is about 136% of the 3% that we're looking at this year of $187,000. And I want you to do it consciously. That's really what I'm asking. Have that conversation of what we're levying on the citizens and what we are not, and do it in a very conscious manner. We now have more information from the city staff, so you've got that input that I suggested in the email. And to look at that critically and do it with a knowledge base. That doesn't mean you can't go back in coming years and recoup that 3% as a foregone tax base. We've got 3% sitting there now, and you could do 2 years of 5, but not have such a steep increase for the citizens of Moscow in the coming fiscal year. And I'm over my time limit.
Thank you, Dan.
Your Honor, we have a letter that was given to me by a citizen.
Okay.
This is from Marshall Comstock, 932 North Mountain View Road, Moscow, Idaho. Dear Mayor Lambert and Moscow City Council members, as I'm unable to attend the budget hearing in person, I would appreciate these comments being included in the record. I disagree with the decision to implement a residential stormwater utility. As it is an enterprise fund, there should be a direct benefit to the ratepayers. I see little or no benefit to the city of Moscow. The other enterprise funds, including water, sewer, and sanitation, have a direct benefit. Moscow is a farming community. The city has no jurisdiction over the outlying areas adjacent to the city other than zoning. In the outlying area and our city, our drainage system is composed of Paradise Creek and the South Fork of the Palouse River. Land is farmed right up to the banks of the streams. There is little control of silt sedimentation and chemicals. Once the drainage leaves the city and the state, Washington farmers use the same farming practices. In other words, a small amount of control that the city of Moscow implements with stormwater utility actions has very little effect on the overall goal at a hefty price. The 2022 budget includes maximum allowable increases in property taxes of 3%. Moscow is growing. The city has seen substantial growth in 2021 and is expected record growth in 2022. This growth produces more tax dollars for the city. With the new tax dollars, is it really necessary to take the 3% increase? I was a proponent for the budget levy for the new police station. There was a finite amount of money included in the bond for new construction of the police station, for remodeling of the old police station, and the man building. The city has made the decision to sell the old police station to the U of I for around $1 million. As the building has not been remodeled by the city, there should be money freed up for other remodeling projects. The revenue from the sale should pay down the bond and therefore reduce property taxes for Moscow property owners. The overruns in the police building budget should have been made affordable by reducing many of the bells and whistles included in the plan. To raise the property taxes, implement a new enterprise fund, and to continue to pay on the bond in one budget year seems excessive. Also, with these increases in taxes and fees, it goes against the goal of helping with affordable housing in Moscow. Thank you for your consideration.
Something comes to mind when we talk about the police station and that will be brought up in the next public hearing, which will be in depth to answer some of those questions. One thing we got to recognize, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if it has affected anybody out there. I'm pretty sure it has, but there has been inflation galore, whether you buy a house, whether you remodel a house, any kind of a new project you do. When you go down to the food store and you buy food, whether you go out and put a slurry seal on a road or you try to do a new paving project and or you put a new sewer pipe in, the skyrocketing amount that has happened, and it's coming all around us, and I'm sure folks out there see that all the time. Bells and whistles, we don't believe in bells and whistles, and so with that, Marshall, who is a friend of mine, I'd love to, him and I will have a conversation about that, because I don't know what he's talking about bells and whistles. It's a police department that we are going to have, and it's going to be a police department that's going to last us for the next 5 decades. So, other folks want to come up? Please come up. I just wanted to throw a few things out there for food for thought. I mean, we got a good crew out here. This is your chance. We love to see a crowd in here during budget time because we like to hear these things. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing at 8:14, but I will make some comments. The budget process, 8 years that I have been the mayor of Moscow, I will tell you, we work and we work and we work, and it starts with staff and it starts early in the year, and it's a process, and it's not an easy process. There are a lot of hours involved in putting these books together, reading through these books, and really trying to make the right decisions for all of us. Do we get it right all the time? Absolutely not. Who does out there? Because none of us are perfect. But we are frugal about what we do, and we look within what we did. And as Gary had explicitly said last year, we put the brakes on everything. Salary freezes, no tax increases, sanitation fees were rolled back. So there were things that this city did, and we did collectively to work things through. So, but with that being said, too, you cannot do those things year over year over year, or you're going to run into all kinds of problems down the road. Kicking a can down the road for infrastructures and things that need to be desperately done, you need to be working through them as you go along. If you don't do that, you are asking for big problems down the road for the next set of city officials that have to deal with it. Gary, with that, did you have something you wanted to say before
Just here to answer questions if the council has them.
This is over to council, so
Well,
Brandy.
I just wanted to make kind of one comment too, thinking about, you know, how many times we heard about the governor's imposed
Right.
initiative, yes, tax break, right?
Yeah.
So that's $1.5 million, is that right? And so, I was thinking about what Dan said with a $2 million increase. Well, 1.5 million, we knew was just, if we elected as a body to take that, 1.5 million, that was gonna be a one-year thing. We could have said no and not done that, but we all agreed that we wanted to do that. We don't get it again. As far as we know, that's not gonna happen again, but that was a one-time thing, which does skew when we're looking at the difference between 2021 and 2022 revenue. It's actually about $190,000 more. It's not close to $2 million more. So I just want to, we keep referring to that many times, and I'm not sure that everyone is aware the amount of that $1.5 million and how significantly that kind of skews things. And for me, it's more meaningful in a way to compare our levy in this budget is proposed at 508 to 2020, which was at 535. So it's actually less. It's actually gone down when we take out that very unusual tax break that was a one-time thing.
Well, Brandy, to that very point, we knew that last year going into this, when we talked about that, we knew
Right.
that would be something that would come up, but also that's one of the very important reasons we had Gary show that levy rate, and where we're at the 5.08, I believe it is now, in that, how that works over a period of time and years with a line, we're pretty close to even on that as we go along. Some years are higher, some years are lower, but that levy rate is something that is a big deal to me because it really can judge us within other cities in the state. And we're out of the 30 examples that we have in our book, I think we're number 10 on the bottom side of that.
Yeah.
So there's 20 way above us. And there's other reasons for that factor as well. However, but that does show the levy rate is within the ballpark of what we're working with. Gina.
Since not everyone had the experience of the memo from Tyler regarding the $255,000, will you clarify that for us? What's said in there? And maybe it's Tyler that has to come up and you can do the dog and pony, but
fine
you just
with me.
kind of let everyone know what happened with that, please.
Oh, by the way, while we're waiting for Tyler to get up here, man alive, 2 years ago when we started talking about this EPA mandate of having a storm utility for what we're doing, I absolutely hated it with a passion. I mean, it just was, and Gary will tell you this, it was like me swallowing a toothpick. It didn't go down very well. And we stalled it for a year the best we possibly could because I really don't like these things. But it's one of those things we have. And the letter that we heard from Marshall Comstock about no control over what farmers put on their land, and of course they got to do that to grow their crops. But when it flows into the city and what flows out of our treatment plant and down the stream, we're liable for. And that is black and white, and there's no getting around it. Now, is that fair? I don't really think so, but that's something we have to deal with. And so this is part of the process as well. With that, Tyler?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Council, happy to be here tonight. First off, I'd like to say just very much appreciate the letter from Dan and his participation on a lot of the utility things that we've had. It's, an engaged populace really helps us keep an eye on things, and what we wanted is to be as responsible as we can with the taxpayer dollar, and the residents of Moscow fund these utility systems that we have. But one of the things we really try to do, and one of the things that's made it great working in Moscow, is that we try to responsibly maintain the infrastructure. Gary mentioned a little bit earlier tonight that we have a neighboring city that really ran into some problems because you can have a false economy of putting off some increases in these areas and put them off for some short-term savings. But, I think we all know what the result of continually having those sort of deferred payments. They come due at some point, and usually when they come due, they're a lot more expensive than if we just keep up on them. And so it's something that as a city, we've really tried to do with very limited resources, is be responsible with those dollars. And so as we look at, there are certainly some funds that will be freed up with the formation of the storm utility. So there are certain activities we were engaging in that we have to continue to engage in with the formation of the storm utility. But as we look at where those funds are at and what they could even possibly be freed up for, and we looked at the areas that we have there, really the most responsible thing for us, we feel, to do is to continue to work toward having sustainable utility systems that we operate very transparently and very efficiently. And so the two primary areas, as I lay out in that memo, that we have funding is in the sewer utility. The sewer utility has a healthy capital budget, but that can be a little bit deceptive because we have a couple very expensive improvements coming up in the area of sewer, and we have a lot of very old pipes in the ground. And so we have a lot of capital improvements that have to be made in that area. And so we've had a rapidly escalating cost. We've all seen the inflation. We've seen the projects that come in. We had one on the consent agenda tonight that was almost twice the amount that we had in an engineer's estimate that was generated a mere few months ago. And so we're looking in the face of that at trying to keep up with this. As was mentioned in the budget presentation, we suspended the sewer increase that was slated for last year already because we had a little bit more room in the sewer budget, but we just didn't feel it would be at all responsible to suspend that yet again. And the funding that was going towards storm in the sewer department was primarily going toward the studies that led toward the formation of the storm utility. And that was something we could justify within the sewer, but ongoing storm maintenance we can't justify, especially after we have a permit in place that dictates that we need to be managing storm differently. And then the bulk of the funds are located in the street fund. And I think as all the council's aware, especially those who've been around here for years, as I come back every year, just bemoaning how our funding mechanism for streets is not adequate. It's just not close. And the council's done a really nice job clawing and scraping more money into the streets budget. But for many years, it was $200,000 annually was the average that we had going into our pavement management program. We need $1.5 million just to keep the roads in the condition you see out there today. That's not to make improvements. That's just to tread water. And so at that point, it feels deeply irresponsible when we have a fund that is already sucking air badly. And the only reason that storm activities were funded out of streets was because it was the only place we have to fund them out of, to pull that from that location. And so while I certainly do appreciate taking a hard look at any dime that we bring in and looking for offsets in this situation, it didn't feel like the responsible way to manage those utilities.
Thank you, Tyler.
I have to say, from a lawyer's perspective, the statement that said there was not a direct connection with respect to the stormwater ignores the fact that if we do not comply with the issues of the permit, the damages that we will pay will far exceed anything that we're paying for here. And so the fact is, we are mandated to create this, and we've got to do it. So I think that it's kind of like non-negotiable in so many ways. We pay or I pay a lot more later.
And I would remind the council that, the initial estimates that we got right off the bat came in at over $12 per ESU.
Mm-hmm.
And we received clear direction from this mayor and council that we were to get as skinny as we possibly could. And I think I've mentioned before, we hacked and carved and used every cutting implement we could find to bring this down to as palatable a number as we could. But yeah, we do have a permit and we do have to comply with it.
And I might add to that is also the temporal aspect wherein we've put off initiating the stormwater utility for a year already. And if we postpone it another year, this is putting us perilously close to not being able to fulfill our obligations under that EPA permit. And that sets us up for big fines and other issues, as well as not getting anything in place to actually address the issue at hand.
Our environmental services staff and our street storm staff really got creative to be able to punt for another year. And we've been scrambling to do in-house everything we possibly can to facilitate backloading all of the things that we absolutely have to have the funding for the last, we're now just have 3 years left of a 5-year permit. And there's significant work to do that's going to hit both our environmental services staff, our street storm staff, and our community planning and design staff pretty heavily. And so it's been heavily backloaded. I could not even close to confidently say that we could achieve all of the provisions of the permit within a 2-year period. It's going to be tight as it is. We'll get there, but it's going to be tight.
Thank you, Tyler. Oh, by the way, folks, I love civic engagement. I've had a lot of that the last year and a half. So I just wanted to share that with you because look at folks, we all live in the same community. We should be concerned about everything goes on. How much money we spend, where we spend it, how we spend it, why we spend it. And I certainly, as a mayor, have absolutely no problem with that because I think we need to be checked on all the time. There's not a single thing wrong with that. So with that, come on, council. Ann?
I have a few.
Okay.
So the slide about smart transit reminded me that I had a question about that. Is their request line dependent, meaning that I know they're considering adding an additional line? Would that mean that we would see an increase in the future?
Well, Gina could probably answer that more, but yes. The third route has been on the table for a lot of years. We thought we had something a couple of years ago on it. That did not pan out. So I don't know if it's contemplated in the future or not, but if it's added, I'm sure there will be an increase in cost as well.
If I can add 2 cents to that, the nature of the transportation world is changing dramatically. And so the model that we have right now with a bunch of big buses taking X amount of people around could dramatically change to a fleet of Ubers perchance or something like that. So the third route is still sort of on the table, but I think maybe a new way of considering transportation and that sort of thing is probably, I don't want to say it'll take precedence, but it's really probably more pressing, honestly, than a third route. So will you see an uptick, or will we see an uptick in the next coming years? Probably, but it may not be necessarily for purchase of buses or a third route. It may be for something else altogether.
Thank you for that extra context. I've been thinking about it too in the sense of national funding and other possibilities. And I was curious about that. So for economic development, I forgot what the unspecified $3,000 is for.
It was just general economic development. If we had a small study that needed to be done, consultants will sometimes, if somebody's doing a regional study and we can participate in it, that's what that would be for.
Thank you. And then I know in previous years at the budget workshop, we had a lot of discussions around economic development. And at the workshop, there was just a question about partners' commitments to the joint efforts we fund, primarily CETA and PEP. Have we had an update? Because I think at the time that we were talking about it, we only knew of the university's position.
Yeah, the University of Idaho I'm on the PEP board, as you know, and Gina, of course, is the executive director. The University of Idaho has us PEP funded at $40,000 for the next year, as did the city of Moscow. We just heard from Latah County unofficially that they are not looking at funding PEP in the upcoming year. And the University of Idaho may be reviewing whether they want to continue funding at the same level. So the partners are still kind of milling around trying to find their way. But like I said, the unofficial from Latah County is that they will not be participating this next year.
When will we know officially what their decision has been?
When they pass their budget.
Can you remind me when that is? I know it's coming up.
It's got to be in place by October 1st. I suspect their public hearing will be
September.
Mid to the end of the month.
Thank you.
So when does, when the city has participated in the past and contributed, when does that check get dispersed?
Typically, I believe we pay it out in 4 installments, if I recall right.
Yes.
Or no, is it 4?
4 installments.
Yeah.
So to be clear, we pay 1/3, the university pays 1/3, the county pays 1/3.
That's how it has been in the past,
Yeah, I just want to make sure that
Yep.
that's clear, so we've potentially lost 1/3 of the funders.
And the PEP board will meet to talk about exactly what we're talking about here, to determine what direction the organization is going to take. So I can't give you any more information than that because I don't know any more information.
So is that kind of a conversation that I don't want that to hold things up here, but it seems kind of critical that we would need an understanding of what that means for PEP to have that much cut.
Yeah.
Before we disperse that.
Certainly. Certainly. If there is a situation where PEP does not become viable, it becomes unviable, then it would be foolish for the city to continue to make its payments. So we may not have that at the beginning, but I'm anticipating we will have a meeting within the next week to 2 weeks and be able to report back to council.
Those disbursements come sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could please jump in.
Jump in?
Those disbursements come at we submit an invoice. So if there's something inherently not right with the organization, that invoice isn't coming. So the money would stay there.
Okay. Who's next? Sam, did you have something? You look like you want to say something.
Well, I'm always happy to say things, but I feel a little silly saying I don't really have questions, but I think that's because I asked several questions during the budget and followed up on it. So the things I've asked have been answered. I do want to say I appreciate Tyler's explanation on this and the help he had on the climate issues that have come up that have to do with the budget and have to do with what we want to do coming out for, throughout the future. I think it's a great explanation about why we can't continue to hold off in a year. And I think, Dan, I think your questions are great. And I had to actually write things out again and ponder it out. And I was on vacation, thank you very much, right? But I went through my book and went through other things. So honestly, I don't really have questions, but I do appreciate the staff's work to cut this down, I think, as thin as it can be, because I think they worked really hard to make sure there was no waste going on anywhere. So.
Ann.
I had one more. And I know we've seen this before, but the fluctuation in fees from year to year doesn't seem to correspond to the year of the rate study that they're based on. So I just wanted to ask about that. And there's a couple years in particular that either saw a huge jump or a huge dive. FY 2009 and 2010 and 14. And I know that can be, that's why we fund capital improvements too. But I just wanted an explanation, because if you're looking at this and you don't know the history of that, those ones are kind of odd.
Yeah, well, those were based on actual increases or actual adjustments. So the rate study, they may vary from the rate study if there was something that occurred that was extraordinary and had not been considered in the rate study. Additionally, if you look in the sewer fund, I think it's the sewer fund. Yes, the sewer fund, you'll see some variance when we were selling sewer bonds. So there may have not have been as much of a rate increase that year because the amount of money to repay the bonds did not come due until the following year. So things like that. We look at it every year, look at the capital improvement program, look at the rate study, and make sure that we're able to, keep with the plan. For instance, on we talked about the 2.25 that was not levied or raised in the sewer rate last year. We came to that conclusion because we looked at the capital improvement program, those sorts of things. Could it reasonably be delayed and give the ratepayers some relief? That decision was made by council. Same thing with the sanitation fund. So sometimes the actual rate, the budgeted rate, is not exactly what the rate study calls for if there's something extraordinary that happens.
So could you say, is it fair that it's largely around either economic considerations or capital improvements?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's clearly a function of capital improvement necessities and operational costs.
I think that was my last question.
All right. Gina?
I just have a kudo to share. The concern that we all had with the drug dog and the need to maybe look at the issue holistically, like we were talking. I really feel good, and I feel positive about the suggestion for the donations to the Recovery Center and ATVP. I think that's a beautiful solution, or a set of beautiful solutions. So whoever came up with that, rock on.
Thank you, Brandy.
Well, thank you
And
for,
others.
I think Art was supportive of that as well, so, yeah.
It was mostly you. And I did have one other point I wanted to make, was that when it comes to the taxation and the ability to levy within the city, we have half the city's infrastructure essentially off the tax rolls. We've got schools, government buildings, which is city, county, state, federal, churches, all of it is off the tax rolls. So I think somewhere in the neighborhood of slightly over 50% of the potentially taxable real estate in town is off the tax rolls, and the other half has to bear the cost of the infrastructure support for all the rest of that. So there is a good chunk of missing money in this town that doesn't necessarily occur in other municipalities within the state.
Good point.
Yeah, and I'll just to kind of in a different way, talk again about this 1.5 million, that one-time deal. I mean, I think that I recall us having some hesitation, like it feels like this is what we should do, take advantage of this tax break, but it's going to look bad the next year when things go back to normal, because it's not a regular thing. But we decided that was not reason enough to not go for it, that we would just have to deal with this and do our best to explain that.
Brandy, to that point of view, we knew a year ago, and there were cities in the state that didn't do that, that didn't take that money and give their citizens a break because of the very point that you're making. And we didn't think that was the right thing to do. Simple as that. We thought we got to give our folks the best break we can and go from there. And hopefully we, as you said, try to explain it this year in depth. So, Maureen?
I have a question on the housing project. We put about $50,000 into that. What have we historically given? There's some kind of comment back and forth, and maybe I've just missed it exactly. Like, how much did we pay last year towards housing issues, and how much did we pay the year before that? Is it in there that I missed it?
It is not a continuing program.
Okay.
What started out, we had affordable housing participation. Actually, it was a challenge that Carl Johnson gave us, and he matched $20,000 from the city, bringing it to a total of $40,000. That was the line item for years. For about 4 or 5 years, it laid fallow. And finally, a project came forward that we were able to participate in. We've also participated with, permit help, that sort of thing, but we've never had a fully funded program. And there's no program identified at this point. I know that Bill Knapp has had conversations with the nonprofits in town that are affordable housing nonprofits. So as that program develops, this funding would be utilized, almost the same thing as the drug dog. We would bring the program back before council. Council would say, yes, this is where we want to go with it, or no, we don't. So it's one of those things where we want to have the money appropriated so you have the flexibility, because you've said that is an issue in your MCA that you wanted to deal with.
And to add to that, Maureen, there's every once in a while there's somebody comes along with a great idea or a great solution in mid-year about, oh, by the way, we can do this, and it's like, if that's appropriated, then you have the ability to do that. If you don't have it appropriated,
Right.
it's something that
No,
will be pushed off for another year.
I just was curious about the historical perspective on
And
that.
I think that started about 15 years ago with Carl, if I remember right, like 2005, Gary, 2006.
Probably a little later than that, back when the CHOTA was first started,
It was 2008, I believe.
2008, yeah.
I know a lot about it because you provided a lot of information
yes,
over the years.
I forgot.
So if I could kind of tag along to this conversation, because it's perfect time. You know, I've been thinking since the workshop about that item as well. And as you said very well, we don't know exactly how it will be used. It's been identified as a major challenge area. We want to have something in place, so if those opportunities come, we can participate and contribute and try to further those efforts. We're not exactly clear on what amount that should be. We have a good suggested amount here in the budget. There's also been the discussion, and Tyler Palmer was very clear about, you know, many people wanting us to have some funds for climate change. As he explained, you know, they're in the midst of this. There's going to be a workshop in September. They're working hard at it. It's unknown if there would be a role for a consultant or not after all the work that they've done. But in any event, that is the other major challenge area that we've identified, similarly to housing, where we really don't know how funds could be used. A consultant could be one, but there could be other issues as well. And so I would like to talk about the idea of splitting that into two, having both a fund for the affordable housing and for the climate change, where we can act on them as something comes up during the year.
Are you talking about separating it, or just new money put in there?
Separating them. Making a
separate the
new
50.
one, similar to what we have for affordable housing, a fund for climate change action.
So put 25,000 in each one, is that what
Exactly,
you're
yep.
suggesting? Okay.
But again, there's nothing in mind with that 25,000.
Exactly. The same with the affordable housing. It's so that we have it, we are identifying it in that same way. This is another major challenge area. We are willing to designate some funds toward it. Looking at those tiers up there, that was tier 2, affordable housing was tier 3. Let's, set aside some funds so that if throughout the year, something comes along and we have determined how we can assist with that, and through the rest of city staff, they would be the most likely ones that would say, here we are in September, here we are in December, in January, in the spring, and now here's what we could do. And we've got that set aside.
Gina?
I think that's a good idea next year.
So you want to keep, do you think we need to keep the whole 50 and designated to affordable housing?
I think, yeah. Yeah, I think that we need to give our environmental services team and their work time to mature a little bit so that we can pinpoint the $25,000 or the $50,000 thing. But I think that we don't know enough yet to do it now.
Well, there'll be another workshop too in probably
Yeah.
December, and then some kind of in the spring of 2022, if I recall right. That's
Right,
kind of
because
what
this
we're.
takes us through to the end of September
Right.
of 2022. So if something can come up before then, I would like to have that ability so that if our staff says, we have some solutions, we have our workshops, we give them direction, they come back and say, okay, now here's what we're recommending to you, but we need $15,000 for it. We can say, great, that's what we have this for.
What about our non-committed 20,000?
Well, I mean,
They call it?
I like, the same way we have it delineated that this is specifically for affordable housing, if we come up with, I think, like PEP is working on the group that's going to identify those solutions, and we're kind of waiting to hear what those are, but that's their waiting. Here we have this group working. We don't know what it is, we're waiting, they're still in that process, and when they're done and they come forward, we have funds designated for them as well.
Bill?
If it's something we like, yes.
So I'm not at all opposed to putting money toward our sustainable environment group, but I don't necessarily want to take $25,000 out of what could be potentially for affordable housing, simply because $15,000 doesn't seem like very much if there's an avenue to go in. So I don't know that I want to split that up. I'd be happy to try and find other ways to try and get money to that group, but I don't want to take it out of something we have, because $50,000 goes fast, especially when talking about anything with housing.
Yeah, I think for both programs, I would say we don't know how they could use. We don't have anything identified, but we could always reappropriate, right? Couldn't we?
It depends what you're saying. You're talking about adding money?
No,
or-
if it, let's say it were split and we had an opportunity that was identified for $50,000 to assist with an affordable housing thing, we could then do an open budget later and take that from the climate
Well,
line.
you only have to open the budget if you exceed your appropriation. So
Okay.
the general fund has typically sufficient capacity. What you're talking about is taking what is already an expenditure, a proposed expenditure, appropriated expenditure of $50,000. If you were to split that, it's still general fund money. Then you would have $25,000 in each. And should either program not yield any fruit, then at council direction, you could overrun one line item and you would just take whatever was underrun in the other line item. It's a little bit unique, I guess. But as long as it doesn't, we're not trying to create new money out of somewhere and then have to rebalance the budget. Again, it's a $102 million budget. $25,000 or $50,000 may not be significant in that amount of money, but it causes us to have to rebalance a lot of different stuff.
More,
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Did you have something else to say, Brandy?
No, I was going to call on you, but that's not my role. So I was waiting for the mayor to see you.
Thank you
I'm
very
sorry.
much, Brandy, for letting me take charge back on a thing, Maureen.
Okay, so
I'll tell
this is,
you.
I think, for at least for me, this seems like a very unique year because it's only my second year and last year was a mess because we had COVID. But it seems like this year that there are several uncertain, that there's projects kind of in the work without plans. And it seems to me we've got like 4 of those that are kind of tentatively out there, you know, the drug dog, and then we're going to have a presentation on that in a subsequent time, and after that comes, then we can allocate the money that's already been appropriated for it. Simply the same thing with PEP. We have this issue that comes up that says, we don't know what's going to happen because we don't know what the U of I is going to do, we don't know what the county's going to do, so that's another one, but we have the money just sitting there. And then the issue in terms of housing, it just seems to me that we again have, we read the study, we looked at all the stuff with respect to housing issues, and I'm very committed to fair and affordable housing, but there's a lot of ways that may be sliced up, and how that gets used is an interesting question. What we don't have earmarked in the budget is some money allocated for climate change. And the issue is, it makes perfect sense to me. I really appreciate, I mean, truthfully, I really am a fan of Tyler on this issue, because I feel like what he's going to say is always well thought out and said, we don't want to spend money right now on a consultant. We're doing that work with staff, and we know exactly what we need and how to do it versus somebody coming in from the outside having to relearn it. So I really appreciated your sense of, don't give us $20,000 for a consultant, but I do think that if we really have a commitment to the issue of climate change, we need to allocate some money in there, because we're hoping somewhere between the September meeting, the December meeting, and the spring meeting, we have an idea coming up that's a proposal. Similarly, I really hope that housing comes up with a concrete solution. You know, people throw around ideas and say, you know, the trust, and I think let's look broadly at that, and I'm sure that you guys are looking broadly at it. What I want, I'd like the budget to reflect a commitment to allocating some funds, whether we have a plan or not a plan at this moment, on what to do on climate change. Because I think we're getting a lot of sentiment from residents saying, hey, you got to do something, and I don't want to jump in at all. And I appreciate the systematic approach that's being taken on that, but I also want to say we are committed to this issue, and here is some money if there's a plan that we approve.
Well, and to that point, that money has got to come from somewhere else within the budget.
Right.
I get that, but the issue for
And
me is,
yeah, but the point I'm trying to make, Maureen, is that money's got to come from somewhere. You got to make a decision if that's what the council's going to do. It's got to come from somewhere, and how much is that money? I mean,
which is why I know that. I guess I just sit there and think, we don't know what we're going to do with the housing money. We don't know where the money's going to come from climate. And so the answer is, if it's out there and there's some flexibility and there's some way to know that there's going to be money out there, it also signals we as a council are committed to that issue. If, Tyler, you have nothing to do and nothing to say to us in, you know, at our 3 meetings, and there's no way we don't need any money for it, it just sits there and it can get allocated to someplace else. But I guess I just feel like we as council talk a lot about this issue, and to have something that says $25,000 for this one and $25,000 for that, knowing that if a great idea comes up, one of the things I love about this city right now is when a great idea comes up, we will try to do whatever we can to make that happen. It is a phenomenal attribute of the city and the city council. While I'm sitting here, what I've learned from sitting here on the council, but we'll make it happen. And so let's just make a commitment that says this issue is strong enough and put some money into it. And we don't know what we're going to do with housing, and it's not saying we're going to stop at 25. It just simply says we are committed to 2 of our priorities, and let's allocate money to it.
I have a comment.
I've been sitting here straddling a fence.
that's why I'm asking you.
So I can see good points to be had on both sides. One, that we don't really have a concrete program on either side to go for. But at the beginning of this public hearing, it was pointed out by Gary that the budget is the city's policy statement and direction statement.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what's weighing on me, is that putting per Brandy's suggestion, divvying up the 50,000 for affordable housing into 25,000 for affordable housing, 25,000 for sustainable environment issues, provides a policy statement on the part of the council and the city that this is important and this is the direction we would like to go. So that's where I fell off the fence onto that side.
I hope,
So
I'm
you're
glad you got
liking,
caught.
that's what you're saying, all right.
I'm not thrilled, but that's what makes sense to me.
And we still do have the non-prioritized that we could contribute.
There is
to,
some in there, yes, that's
you know,
correct.
either before having to.
I'm wondering, I mean, could we just reconceptualize it, recognizing that they're both MCAs, and they're not the only two MCAs, but could it be something like the MCA line item, right? And if it ends up being 30,000, because maybe let's say, 3 houses get billed, 3 reimbursements get submitted, recognizing we don't have a program set up, right? And it ends up being 20,000 for professional services, then there we go, right? So is there any reason why we would have to split it up?
Gary, that's a good point. That's a good question.
It'd be my
Yeah.
recommendation that you split it up. Otherwise, you should put $50,000 in non-prioritized projects, and as things come up, go ahead and divvy it out that way. That's always kind of been, council has not wanted to do that because then you get programs that aren't necessarily MCAs, people coming in and requesting it. So it's a fairly simple do at this point.
Just split the
Again,
two.
yeah, if you were to go 25 in each, we'd just create a new line item for that. And we wouldn't have to balance it on the revenue side because it isn't changing the amount of expenditure, just how it's being divvied up.
That was a real big, Gina?
I'm struggling. I hear you, and it's an MCA for me too. Climate change and our sustainable environment issues are a big deal. But I don't think we can do much with 25,000 with a housing program either. And I just want us to be aware and judicious with that. And maybe what we do is leave the 50,000 for housing and just take that 20 that we already have sitting there and put that as, change it from, what's it called?
Non-departmental.
Legislative,
Non-departmental. Just take it and
non-prioritized
call
projects.
it climate change.
Okay, having been on lots of different committees that do brainstorming in terms of how do we allocate and how do we resolve and problem solve on our issue, it seems to me that if I were on that committee, I would probably think about how to do it without looking at the 25,000. I would sit there and look at it and say, in a perfect world, how do we do that? And you have tiers, if we have this much money, if we have that much money, and then that is brought to us, and it says, if I have 10,000, this is how I would spend it. If I have 20,000, if I have 30,000, and then we can make a decision in terms of that money, what are we gonna fund? And I guess I just see that just because we only have $25,000 in it, it should not stop anybody from dreaming about how to do it and coming back to us and saying, wow, we have this fabulous idea that this year we could spend 40 and get X. And then they come back and we say, Gary, can you help us figure out how we find the additional $15,000?
And in the meantime, as Art said, by setting it up, we're demonstrating a commitment to both of these things that fulfills our mission statement and is in line with what we have set as our strategic plan,
Well,
and we're not
The policy statement.
leaving one out. at the
That's,
expense of the other.
you still have some latitude with that non-departmental line of that
So I'd say
$20,000, so.
leave the non-departmental line alone because we don't know what else might come up. But also bear in mind that even those $25,000, although not completely enough to leverage a large project, can be used as seed money to go for matching grant monies and fund up a much larger grant through participation that way. So the opportunity does exist there to leverage those funds for something bigger.
It's a small distinction, but I would support 20-30 split. And that's because my understanding of, again, recognize we haven't set out and passed a housing program, but that the fees that people end up requesting for hookups or whatever that looks like is about $10,000. So it adds up to about 3, hopefully, right? And then 20,000 is the number we've heard for several months tossed out by different members of the community. So I like that split. I'm supportive of it, and I would support for a 20-30 split.
Okay, well.
Well, do we need to just issue direction to
Just
staff?
give us
to
direction.
do that modification, then we can proceed on with the actual actions.
Yeah, we'll just create a line item. It's still in the general fund, so we'll take that direction. It doesn't affect the appropriation ordinance or the L2. You need to come up here.
Come on up, Sarah. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our finance director, Sarah Banks. So she is our numbers person, so.
So just a quick question in regards to what we're discussing. This is all a 20-30 split out of the affordable housing line, correct?
Right.
Yes.
So is there an option of, versus us creating a new line, is there an option of changing the line item name to something that's more encompassing?
That's what I asked.
Well, versus me creating a new line item, yeah.
Actually,
Okay.
I'll tell you, the
Okay.
other part of that is that from my perspective, I take what Art said, that what we're doing is if we have a line item there that says, you know, climate change, sustainability, it makes it a policy statement. And I'm one who sits here and thinks
Perfect.
the policy statement needs to carry weight. It will carry weight.
Okay, perfect, then yeah, I don't see any overall issue with that.
Okay.
Yeah, the only point is if you have it, if you set it up like the current non-prioritized projects, really what you're saying is setting up an MCA line item that we wouldn't have direction on, so.
But we don't get direction on either of those until we find out that there's a proposal
something
from
comes.
housing or from
Right,
climate
right.
change. And so, you know, it sits there with money, like we have various capital improvement projects that have money just sitting there. It's the same thing. This money is sitting there until a project comes forward and it says, we believe that this is important enough, we should fund it. And I mean, we can take a vote, but I don't really care whether it's 25-25 or 20-30. You know, there's some logic to the 30, there's also some logic to just saying we care about each of them equally.
Art, you have the floor.
So I would say, let's just follow along with Ann's proposal and do the 20-30 split in favor of the affordable housing. And with that in mind, I would make a motion to approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings. It be read by title and published by summary.
Second?
If I could ask for some further direction.
Well, just hang on a second. It's because I was going to say there'll be further discussion, so Art, you want to give him?
Yeah.
So is
Well,
it
the direction was to take the $50,000 from the affordable housing line item, split that into $30,000 for the affordable housing item, $20,000 for support of sustainability and climate change issues.
Yeah, I'm looking for consensus from the whole council, because,
I don't feel strongly either whether it's
okay.
an even split or the 30-20, and if there's a reason that has been in the past.
One of the things is, one thing the board will meet about is looking at the amount of funding that we have now, that PEP has now, and can they continue operations in several different scenarios? That's why there's nothing in front of you right now.
Okay.
We just found out about this, haven't
Yeah.
had a chance to move on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about the best I can tell you. But if your direction is that you want that invoice, you want the explanation that PEP is still in business and they're providing the measurable results that PEP contract with the city for, then it would go on as business as usual. If that was unable to be done, then of course the city wouldn't be expected to make any more payments.
No, and we will, PEP has been good, I believe, and will continue to be good about updating the council and its funders about what's happening. And so as things change, if they do, you will all know.
Well, I'm not quite sure it's going to change
It
yet.
may be the same.
We won't
just
know.
a different
So having
funding
40,000
model.
less.
Marie's got it.
So I guess when we first started talking about PEP, you said, you know, when the new funding comes in, we'll see about the viability of PEP. And so, you know, part of that is that, you know, it's how much money is out there to do that job. And if we have less money to do the job, then what can we do and what are the measurables that exist out there? I think it's kind of a tenuous, hard time. And so what it seems to me is the money's sitting there in somewhat, that's why I included it in the uncertainties, because there's a lot of uncertainty out there on so many things this year, and one of them is PEP. And so if the city says, if the county says no, and the university says no, I mean, it comes back to us to say, what are we going to do, and what can happen with 40 versus 120.
It may be everything from different hours to different territory to work with to a whole new thing. We don't know that yet. So it's even premature to
That's a
throw
further
those three options
So that
out.
almost sounds like that could be the type of thing where we can have a discussion later, once things settle and you know what that, and that budget is known, and then you're able to quantify what,
Yeah,
how things would look differently. And
I
what
think it's
that-
entirely appropriate to have PEP come make a presentation to council
Absolutely.
showing exactly what's going to go on.
But we're not hurt anyway. I mean, right now, it's just, it's out there, status quo, business as usual, and that's how we should plan on it, right? Knowing that
Exactly.
something may happen, but
something changes.
man, if I were a fortune teller, that'd be sure great, right? But, so we're good right now. I mean, things always have the potential to change, but we're good right now.
Well, except things did just change apparently
With the
because the county, yeah. So
Right,
that's
but
new
with
info.
our budget, it hasn't changed because we don't know what's going on with PEP. So for us in this body right
Right,
here,
right.
we're good.
Yeah.
And to Gary's point, there may be funding in there that carries them through this fiscal year that's not an issue. It could be an issue the following year, which by then you're gonna have all kinds of information. So I don't see where that's a huge concern.
And I don't think that there, if my understanding of that wasn't a statement that says we should not have it in the budget right now. The issue is simply that, now there's suddenly like an alert on that says, oh my gosh, and make sure that when we part the everything up there, like clouds, we have a clearer view in terms of what does that look like and how are funds being used. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't think there's any question on here that we're going to keep this in the budget. It's what it looks like as it evolves over this year. Does that make sense?
Yes, I agree. It's not a question of not funding it, but just more, will there be an opportunity to know what that's going to look like if it ends up being different in the future?
Answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, we all good?
Yes.
Everybody's good?
I second Art's motion. Didn't somebody else said it already?
No, it was second or would have died about 20 minutes ago.
Was I lost on where that went at some point? Because I'd like to vote.
Here it is, Maureen. Art made the motion to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings that be read by title and published by summary, and Sandra seconded that motion. I will start the roll with you, Maureen.
Thank you. Aye.
Gina?
Due to my day job, I vote in favor of everything except the part with economic development because of that conflict of interest. So I accept.
Okay, Sandra?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Brandy?
Aye.
And Ann?
Aye.
Okay, there's 2 pieces of action here. That took care of action number A.
You want to read the ordinance now?
Not until the next one's
Okay,
approved.
well, I make a motion
Support
to authorize the mayor's execution of the L2 property tax certification in the aggregate amount of $7,537,647.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Art and a second by Gina to authorize the mayor's execution of L2 property tax certification in an aggregate amount of $7,537,647. And I will start to roll with Ann,
Aye.
Brandy,
Aye.
Art,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
and Maureen.
Aye.
Now I'll read that ordinance number my city clerk, Lori Hopkins, gave me, 2021-10. An ordinance entitled the Annual Appropriation Ordinance appropriating $102,415,356 for the purpose of defraying all necessary expenses and liabilities of the city of Moscow, Latah County, state of Idaho for the 2022 fiscal year beginning the first day of October 2021 and ending the 30th day of September 2022, and allocating resources by fund for said appropriation for the objects and purposes set forth on this ordinance, levying ad valorem taxes in the amount of $7,630,035 for the 2022 fiscal year, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. And with that, we are going to take a 5-minute recess and come back at
Sandra,
9:12.
my other thought is that I gave a whole
Thank you, Your Honor.
Hang on just a second, I'm waiting for a rap on the door.
Oh,
I'm not
I
sure we
thought-
got
I
it.
thought it was a wrap with your desk that did it.
Okay, we're ready to go. Thank you for coming back, everybody. We are now on item number 6, which is the sale of the current police station at the University of Idaho. Gary, you have the podium again, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is something the council has seen not only in the last budget presentation, but over the last year at least. So we'll go through a little bit of history, try to keep it as short as possible. It all starts with that there was a general facilities bond election on May 19th of 2019, and there's some question about what exactly did that authorize to be done. This is language that takes right out of the language that was on the ballot. Bond proceeds to be used for purposes of acquisition, construction, remodeling, improvement, or otherwise of a new police station, so that was called out, the new police station, and other public buildings throughout the city, together with all necessary pertinent facilities and equipment, including all necessary land therefor. So the purpose was, and in consultation with bond counsel, the discussion was, okay, suppose something does change midstream. Suppose in order to do one of your remodels, you had to buy an additional piece of land. So try to keep as much flexibility as possible. Okay, so the original projects were the new police facility, which is being constructed on 155 Southview Avenue, and it should be completed in September. And then the repurpose and remodel of the 118 East 4th current police facility for relocation of community development, engineering, and grants offices. And lastly, minor repairs of the man building to house human resources, information systems, and community events. And we don't have a secure vault in this building, one that is not prone to floods. So that will be taken care of in the man facility as well. This is the various stages of the current police department, which served as City Hall until 1993 as well. The old J&J Glass building, and it was Quarters Dairy, started its existence in 1935, I believe. So this facility, the current facility, was originally constructed for a business and industrial use. It was a creamery. It's about 9,000 square feet in size, extensively remodeled as a police station. It did not start out life as a police station or an office building, so it's been remodeled over the years. There's no off-street parking. There are dedicated police parking spaces to the east and to the south. It will require extensive remodeling for return to use as general office. In the original bond estimate, it was $1,500,000. Limited ADA access. The only ADA access is on the northern ingress and egress. Minimal natural light around the outside of the building. There are windows, but nothing to the interior of the building. And it's located inside the Main Street downtown commercial district. So it's a public facility in that area. So the costs were the estimate of $1,500,458. If you take the overrun that is on the police station, we'll get to that in just a moment. The amount of bond proceeds available today for that project are $661,678, leaving a shortfall of about $839,000. Okay, in early spring last year, we were informed that the Haddock building was going to be put on the market by Gritman Medical Park LLC. That building was constructed in 1985 as an office building, 7,500 square feet office space, 1,400 square feet of storage space. Also includes 15 off-street parking spaces. Convenient access, less extensive renovation, increased natural light, and although it's close to downtown and accessible to customers, it is outside of that commercial core. So this is what the building looks like. It's currently undergoing some renovation right now. The purchase price was $875,000, but after there was some replacement necessary of some HVAC systems, that price was adjusted to $848,450. The estimated remodel costs, which were getting fairly close to being completed except for the roof project, $644,220, for a total estimated cost of $1,492,670, which, as you recall, is about $7,500 less than the estimate just to remodel the city-owned current police station. So one of the things council looked at the time that they purchased the Haddock building was they could elect to sell the current police station, return the property to the non-governmental use, and use the proceeds of the sale to help offset the increased cost of construction of the new police station and the renovation of the Haddock building. So with that in mind, we retained Gem Valley Appraisals in March of 2021, and the appraisal that was in your packet showed an appraisal of $975,000. So this is a recap of the funding and expenses. You've got the police services facility, which was estimated in 2019 to be about $7,887,207. The current actual is $8,913,030, leaving a shortfall of just over $1 million, $1,025,000. And as was indicated during the budget presentation as well, we've seen inflated costs of construction. This is no different. 4th Street renovation was estimated at $1,500,428. That has not been updated. Obviously, we would not have sufficient funding to do that without going in and rescoping the project. So when the council authorized purchasing the Haddock building, just saw the numbers on what it would cost to renovate and purchase that building, leaving about $7,800 to the positive. Man building renovation was estimated to be $132,043. It's become just a little bit, scopes increased a little bit. The veneer of the building, they're talking about putting a facing on there to save the masonry construction. So about a $71,000 difference there. So total city facilities project cost leaves a shortfall of $1,088,991. The police station proceeds, if the council approves it tonight, would yield $975,000 approximately, and would leave us, if all of these projects were completed, would leave us needing about $79,700 in order to complete the renovations of the man building, which, as you can see, just about mirrors what the overrun would be for the skin on the man building. So we received a letter of intent from the U of I. They were looking for a place to relocate the Pritchard Art Gallery. So we received a letter of intent from Brian Foisey indicating that they would like to purchase the building from the city for cash in the amount of $975,000. So with that, we came back to council, said, okay, if you're serious about selling it, this is how you go about doing it. So Idaho Code Title 50, Chapter 14 tells you how to do that. First, the city must declare its intent to sell or exchange the property and the value or minimum price for the property or how they want to get rid of it. And council did that at council meeting on July 6, 2021. Okay, after meeting all those requirements, the city clerk was then required to publish a summary of that action of July 6th in the Moscow Pullman Daily News, and had to provide notice of a public hearing that was to take place no less than 2 weeks after the notice. So that has been done as well. It brings us to tonight. Okay, so the process continues tonight. Council must hold a public hearing. After the public hearing is conducted and completed, the council may declare it's in the best interest of the city to convey the property to the U of I for the $975,000. Again, that is part of the requirement. You need to declare that it's in the best interest of the city and that you want to complete that sale. If you do so, if that is the council's action, then direct staff that is what you want to do. We will negotiate a purchase and sale agreement with the University of Idaho, and you also have a draft ordinance that is in your packet. An ordinance needs to be completed as well. If council's decision is to sell the building, staff will prepare the purchase and sale agreement for conveyance to the University of Idaho, or transmittal to the University of Idaho, excuse me, and we will come back to you with both a signed agreement and the ordinance to be passed we should be able to get that done hopefully by August 16th council meeting. So with that, questions? And
Questions.
also Tony Broyle, Special Assistant to the President, is here to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Gary before I open the public hearing, and/or Maureen?
Somewhat of a semantics question, and so will there be a Pritchard Art Gallery? Will that be, is there, is kind of name, is it going to be the name, the Pritchard, or does Pritchard disappear? I'm just curious on the name of it.
That's a question you'd have to ask the University of Idaho.
It's just kind of like.
Tony,
like a
come
weed
on
question.
up here. How are you doing this evening?
Hello, Mayor, Council. Good question. Yeah, Pritchard Art Gallery is owned by University of Idaho, and it will remain the Pritchard Art Gallery. So we'll have, we are taking a look at maybe redesigning the logo, but the name stays the same. So envisioning, as far as signage on the outside, it would be University of Idaho, and then there would also be Pritchard Art Gallery.
Okay, but I just didn't know if we owned the name or not owned the name and what happened with that. That was just, thank you.
Other questions for Tony before I, thank you, Tony.
I have a question for, well,
Gary,
Gary. Just, I mean, this has come up before, but if you would just briefly explain the issue with the university and the zoning.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we discussed this at the last council meeting. The city of Moscow, a municipal corporation, may sell, convey, or exchange a piece of property with or without consideration to another entity, governmental entity, or entity that is supported by taxes, to which the University of Idaho applies or complies with that. And they can do that without the need of holding a public auction, which is the requirement if you're selling it to a non-entity. That's what would have to be done.
And then how about the use of it as a gallery versus an educational institution?
Yeah, those discussions, as council knows, there is a restriction on use of property in the central business district for educational purposes. And the University of Idaho has been advised of that. We've been advised that they intend to use it as a gallery and a retail space, both of which are uses of right in the central business district.
Gina?
Gary, will you remind me too of the discussion of how we got to selling it to the U of I instead of returning it to the tax rolls?
We were approached by the U of I. The U of I, in discussions, what's going to happen with the facility. When we purchased the Haddock building, then council publicly said, look, we may be interested in selling the building. We were then approached by the U of I saying, you know, we've got some ideas. We might want to relocate the gallery. Are you interested? In fact, I believe Tony approached me at one time and said, do you know of any area or buildings that would be available? Just so happened that we happen to have one.
Okay.
I have a comment. I'll send this in an email to Jen too, but I just have a request that this be updated on our website and somewhat prominent. We've gotten a couple questions about it. It would be nice to refer people to it.
Okay,
So I'll send that, but I'll send that request.
okay, thank you.
Okay, well, let's open up the public hearing, huh? Everybody ready for that? We'll open the public hearing at 9:26. Or for those that would like to speak on it, please come up and state your name, and we will give you 3 minutes.
I was happy not to go first, but maybe I'm only. Victoria Seaver, Moscow. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but I'll go on public record. So we needed a police station. We passed a bond. Construction costs went super high. No surprise. Happens all over the country. We made a bunch of cuts. We're still $1 million short. Haddock building dropped out of the sky. Woohoo! That was a great deal. It's a newer building, it's an office building, it's cheaper, it comes with a parking lot. My goodness. So we grabbed that up, and that was in full public disclosure over a bunch of meetings. No, nothing hidden. It was all out there. Now the university wants it. great, because then we put it up for sale. That means profit, good. The Pritchard wants it, they can do all the rehab work for ADA. We don't have to do it. They can go out there and fix up the building facade and make it look really pretty for downtown and match our other buildings, and that's terrific, and it'll be an art gallery jewel right in the center of town. I think that's fantastic. And we'll strengthen the presence between town and gown. That's a good thing, too. So with the selling of the building and not having to spend money on rehabbing it, and the whole Haddock building thing going for less money than what it would have cost us otherwise, we're going to make up that $1 million, almost, make it up, and we'll come out right where the original bond, pretty much right where the original bond put us. That's fantastic, too. And the staff did the work every step of the way and put it out there for everybody to see. And if the council didn't follow up on that, you would be remiss, because this is a good deal. So go for it.
Thank you, Victoria. Mom, Dan.
You guys are going to get tired of hearing from me, I think. And I'm here again to speak from a taxpayer perspective. You know, the budget conversation was good and it was interesting. I think when we look at next year, the $2.1 million I talked about in my information is actually going to be $3.6 million of collection because of what the governor did with the property taxes last year. So in total new collections, and if I'm confusing you on that number, I can enlighten you later. But it's applicable to here too, because Art was talking about how much property in the city of Moscow is in tax exempt category. Prior to the purchase of the Haddock building, Gritman owned that building, and they were paying taxes in the neighborhood of about $14,580. So that came off the tax rolls when the city was purchasing it, and then that tax base was picked up by the rest of the taxes, by the base of the citizens in the community. We have an opportunity to return this to a taxable base. Now, I want to qualify that. I'm a graduate of the institution of the University of Idaho 3 times over. I've sat on the Moscow Arts Commission, Rendezvous in the Park, been involved in Jazz Festival for 25 years, did Chautauquas, Hartung theater programs. So I'm heavily involved in the arts, and I love the arts. But I also want to look at it from a taxpayer perspective. And when we value the building at $975,000, from a taxpayer perspective, not revenues to the city, but a taxpayer perspective, we are not putting a value on what would be today $17,863 of annual taxes, that to grow on an annual basis based upon the levy increases and everything else. So that's it may seem like a small number compared to all the taxes across that's collected across Latah County, but it's also not insignificant. And I think the true value of the building to the community, and we talk about being the best interest of the city, I'm assuming when we say that, it's in the best interest of the citizens of the community, not of the city government. So the question ends up being, so this is a question I'll pose to you, is the transfer of the property from the city to the University of Idaho for the purposes that they've stated they're going to use it for, is that worth $17,000+ annually from the citizens of Moscow and from Latah County? Because that's what that means. And I looked at the appraisal, and it probably wouldn't be appropriate to include the fact that came back off the tax rolls in terms of an appraisal price. But I think the true value to the citizens of the county and the city is to include in somehow the calculation of that $17,800. And again, I'm trying to speak from a taxpayer's perspective, and I think you need to hear that. And again, I have nothing against the arts. I'm fully supportive of the arts. But when the city bought the Haddock building, it took it off the rolls, and so everyone absorbed that. Everyone in the community absorbed that cost. We have an opportunity to put it back on the tax rolls and with a little bit more, and then and try to balance that scale again from a taxpayer perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you have follow-up?
Hang on just a
I
second,
can't do
Maureen,
that.
we're gonna keep on going. Go ahead and sit down, Dan. Ma'am, you wanted to come up? Yeah. Please come up.
Hello, I'm Delphine Keim, and I am employed by the University of Idaho in the Art Design program, and I also sit on the Idaho Commission for the Arts. And while I hear the taxpayer perspective and I understand that we have limited opportunities for revenue, I also want you to consider the return on investment that the arts provide. So there's a range, but the low end of the range is for every dollar spent on the arts is returned by $5 minimally. So I guess when we think about revenue, I guess tax is one aspect of it, but think about the restaurants and places of business in the downtown corridor that people will spend their money, and then that returns to the community. So I guess that's my perspective that kind of balances out the tax issue.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Roger Rowley. I live here in Moscow. I'm here to speak in favor of the sale of the police station to the University of Idaho. As of August 1st, the university terminated its lease with the space at 414 South Main Street. The police station sale creates a path forward for transition of the Pritchard Art Gallery to a new location. Though I'm no longer the director, I greatly appreciate the idea that it will continue to exist. For those curious as to what will happen to the former location, I can tell you that today marks the very first day that Moscow Contemporary is the new tenant on Main Street. I want to assure you that the gallery on Main Street will continue to be the best place to see national arts on the Palouse. Moscow is a small town with a global vision. It deserves to have a gallery aligned with the identity, and Moscow Contemporary fills that need. When the university completes its work to transform the police station, this will grow the important role of the arts for Moscow. It will increase the appeal of the place as a place to live, raise a family, and attract visitors. More art is more art to build a better community. Moscow Contemporary looks forward to welcoming the new Pritchard Art Gallery as the university seeks to extend the long and storied legacy of Ted Pritchard in Moscow. You can learn more about Moscow Contemporary at moscowcontemporary.org and how you all can help us out. And just to reiterate what Delphine just said, based on the budget we had on Main Street, that would translate into $60,000 a year in taxes into the community. So I think it is a growing source of revenue, if not purely through or property taxes, through other activity in the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Are there others who would like to come up and speak? Okay, I'll close the public hearing at 9:36. Maureen, you had a question?
Gary, this is a question to Gary. Goodman is a nonprofit, and I guess my question is were they paying property taxes on the Haddock building?
I don't know if they were or they weren't. Nonprofits, if they engage in proprietary activities, then they do need to pay taxes. For instance, the U of I owns the property underneath the University in Best Western and the Palouse Mall. And so there are property taxes paid by those lessees. So I can't say what Gritman was using the property for. If it was for nonprofit hospital uses, then it would not be paying taxes. But if it was for a proprietary function or they were leasing it out to others, then likely they would pay property taxes. I just don't know.
Right, and so that is an uncertainty in terms of whether we did that or not. I also wanted to say thank you to Roger for coming up and for your sense of support for that, and to announce what it is that the old Pritchard Gallery building is now going to be used for. And it's nice to have more art in the city.
Randy?
I seem to recall, but it could be correct when this came up before, that even if it were to go to auction, you have no guarantee what we would get for the building, regardless of what it's appraised for. Is that correct, or?
No, you can put a floor on it. You can have, say, okay, if we don't get at least $975,000 on it, we withdraw it. So,
But we might end up with a building that we don't sell, or, I mean, there's just no guarantee. That's a risk that would be taken, that we could get 975 from.
certainly, I know as staff, we were very pleased that the University of Idaho made an offer that was the appraised price, which, so you got to assume if it's a valid appraisal, that that is the market value of the property.
Any questions? Art?
Just one tiny point, I suppose, is if there's a mini Vandal store in there, the mini Vandal store would be paying taxes, wouldn't it?
I would assume so. I'm not the tax
Well,
guy,
there's square
but
footage
if they are doing entrepreneurial activities, typically that would be the case.
Not much, but perhaps a little.
No idea. They do collect sales tax at the Vandal store on campus.
Okay, well,
I move that it is in the city's best interest to convey the current Moscow Police Station facility located at 118 East 4th Street to the University of Idaho for the appraised value of $975,000 and authorize such conveyance.
Second?
If I may, if I could ask that you might add into that you direct staff to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement with the University of Idaho and bring an ordinance back to council at the next available meeting.
I think Lori's on it, and I agree.
Perfect.
You can modify the agreement to the proposal to that.
I'll second that modification.
okay, I'm hanging on. Gary added some things to me here.
Who does that?
Okay, the way I understand this, Maureen made a motion, Sandra seconded that motion, to declare that the city's in best interest is to convey the current Moscow Police Station facility located at 118 East 4th Street to the University of Idaho for the appraised value of $975,000 and authorize such conveyance and negotiate a sale agreement with the University of Idaho to bring ordinance to the city council. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes, sir.
Everybody understand? Okay, I will start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Maureen.
Aye.
Okay, so looking forward to that in the future. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 7, which is the lot division at 2209 Shelby Lane. Amy Hendry is with us. Thank you for those folks that have hung in there through 2 public hearings that are part of this lot division. Welcome, Amy. I'm glad you could spend all evening with us.
It's been a pleasure. I'm happy to be here, Your Honor and Council. Tonight, as Gary had, or as the mayor had mentioned, we have a lot division for 2209 Shelby Lane. There we go. So for your consideration tonight, 2209 Shelby Lane, this is the lot in question for the proposed lot division here. In total, the square footage currently sits at just over 24,000 square feet. It is just south of Joseph and east of El Cajon off of Shelby Road here. The proposal is to split the lot into 2 roughly equally sized parcels, just over 12,000 square feet. It's currently zoned R1, which is a single-family residential, low density. As you can see, the two lots would be comparable in size to the lots in the surrounding area. This is the survey that was done of the proposed lot as it sits, and then as the proposed lots would be. Showing one lot being accessed here off of Shelby through the flag portion of this, or flagpole portion of this lot opening up here. This flagpole portion is about 125 feet before it opens to its widest point here. And this lot here would be accessed off a Holiday. So each lot would have access points off of a different street. In low-density residential zoning district, lot minimums, lot widths are required to be a minimum of 80 feet on a street frontage. They are required to be 9,600 square feet in size. And flag lots, as proposed, would they'd be required to be 20 feet abutting the right-of-way, with the flagpole portion of the lot no longer than 150 feet. Both of those lots meet these recommendations, and this is reviewed by the Public Works and Finance Committee on July 27th. Was recommended for approval, and so for those reasons, staff would recommend approval of this lot division with no conditions. And I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions for Amy from council?
I was supportive of bringing this to the full agenda because there was a lot of discussion at the committee meeting. So if anyone wanted to come up and talk about it, they had the opportunity.
Well, and I'm going to give that same opportunity right now, Ann. I just wanted to see if anybody had questions before even though this isn't a public hearing, if there's somebody from the public that'd like to come up and speak on this, please come up and give us your name, address, and what's on your mind. And nobody's rushing up, so I think we're good. And it was discussed in depth, to your point, Ann, at the committee meeting, so, okay.
Hopefully we answered all their questions and they feel good about it.
Yep.
I move the approval of the lot division request with no conditions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Marina and a second by Ann to approve the lot division request with no conditions. I'll start to roll with you, Ann.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Maureen.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amy,
Have a good
for being
evening.
here. Well, that concludes the end of the meeting, but we do have some reports this evening, so I think we'll go quickly on those. And I'll start with you, Art.
Oh,
Your
didn't
reports?
have much. The only matter of import that went on was a tour and introduction at MC to the new owners of both Burning Glass and MC, and it was very informative. Kyle Matter, the head of the KKR Global Impact Investment Firm, was there to explain their plans for the future of MC and the really, really nice building that they're located in. Very informative.
Brandy.
Let's see, Sandra covered Parks and Rec for me, so I'll let her speak to that. I covered planning and zoning for Maureen, and I think I feel like I cheated a little bit. I think it was the shortest planning and zoning meeting that ever happened, but anyways, there was
Are
a.
you volunteering for another one?
There was a public hearing for a 2.6 acre annexation south of Robinson Park Road, east of city limits, a rezone from ag forest to R3, which planning and zoning was recommending approval for. And that was it.
Okay.
All
Ann.
my meetings are in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Sandra.
I did cover Parks and Rec, and that was great because I've had a chance to cover a lot of things, but I hadn't hit that one yet. So thank you, Brandy, for going on vacation. Talked a lot about goldening up Moscow, which was great, and go gold to go green, sort of like the whole theme. So don't water if you don't have to. Let your lawn go dormant. They did a great job talking about that, and also talking about how that will be happening at some of our parks, but not all of them, not all the high-use parks, but some of the other parks that don't get as much use, they will not be watering, or as much, so don't panic. It's a plan, and it should be okay. And the high-use areas will be great. So very informative. I appreciated going to that a lot. And people asked good questions, and David did a wonderful job explaining how this is the route we have to go, and we're trying to save. And I wish David were here right now because he gave a great analogy, and I don't know if I can do it justice about how think of our parks as a public swimming pool, that send people to our parks to use your parks, and don't water your backyards, and let that just be your own backyard. So our parks are our swimming pools, so that was what I got from that. And I honestly can't remember if I reported on the SEC commission or not. They all are kind of a blur. So if I did, I apologize. And if I didn't, the Twitter version is on the memo received from Tyler about the Climate Action Group is working hard, and they are on top of things. They talked about why they didn't need a consultant at this time, that might come up later, but they're in the process of working through things. And the issues that had come up from many of the emails that we had received, the Sustainable Environment Commission talked about what are we doing? Are we doing anything? And we are, and we will continue to do so, and that will come up throughout the year. So if you're interested in those things, please come to the SEC meetings and participate, because they always look for input. I think that's it.
Okay, Gina.
Nothing to report.
Maureen.
Brandy stood in for me for the shortest meeting we've had.
I've got a couple of things, and I'll make them pretty brief. On July 22nd through the 24th, there's a regional Cal Ripken tournament here, which represented 3 states, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, U12. And I'm putting a shout in for our park and rec guys, led by Calvin Macy and team. Man, they had the fields and things really pristine out there. There was just dozens of people I got a chance to talk to from all over these 3 states that were all over our community, and very much appreciate everything from the aquatic center to the ball fields to our downtown to all the various restaurants, so on and so forth. So it was a pretty neat thing to be able to see and be a part of. Also, on the 24th was a Rendezvous in the Park one-day event, and that was a hoot. I was there for on and off for several different hours, but there was some great entertainment, and they were very well organized. They had 30 minutes of playing, 15-minute break, 30 minutes of playing, and so they just chewed through and it was very well organized, so it was pretty impressive. And they had a big crowd there, too. And one of my fun things was last Monday I did a PCEI reading with the kids, and these are kids anywhere from like a year and a half to about 5 years old, and that's kind of a hoot with kids, and tell them the story about bumblebees and how bumblebees work. And that's always kind of a kick in the pants when you're talking to kids, because you never know what a kid will ask you, which is really, really interesting. It's really great, too, because they are so doggone honest. It's amazing. But that was a hoot. That was a lot of fun. And last Wednesday, I had an airport board meeting, and we've got this upcoming terminal thing. You guys are going to get a chance to hear more about that here over this sometime in this next month, and we're moving forward with that. A lot going on there.
So is there any update on this Denver issue?
In the Denver issue, there's a flight in Lewiston, but yes, we very much have got something in the works.
Okay.
But there's nothing concrete. The flight to Boise starts the 17th of this month.
That's really fun.
And
Thank
so that'll
you.
be great. Gary, do you have any reports?
I think you've heard enough from me tonight.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but I don't disagree with you. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let's go.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody. We're out here at 9:50.